So picture a diverse group of young men and women standing in the Virginia State Capitol, presenting a constitution that they had crafted to guide their newly formed democracy. The Constitution lays out the qualifications for office, the rules for elections, the purposes of this new government. In the room that day as they're presenting are a number of state officials and other dignitaries, and indeed the very first person who signs that Constitution is our governor, Terry McAuliffe. A closer look at the young men and women who are up on the dais reveals something interesting about them. On their ankles are tracking devices. And in the back of the room are staff from Beaumont and Bon Air Juvenile Correctional Centers. And yet there they are, feeling justifiably proud for what they've created and what they were embarking on. The very first constitutionally based student government inside a juvenile correctional center in this country. On the wall of my office is a quote by Nelson Mandela that was hand-painted by my daughter Maya. The quote reads, "It always seems impossible until it's done." I love the quote because it embraces a kind of fearlessness and optimism about human potential and human capacity. It liberates us to try to do hard things. We can do more than we think we can. We just need to try. My boss, the governor, Terry McAuliffe, has a related view of governing, and he continually exhorts his cabinet members, us agency heads, to think outside the box, to go big. He tells us it's okay to make mistakes when we're doing this if what we're trying to do is to improve the lives of the people of Virginia. At the Department of Juvenile Justice, where I'm the director, we took Governor McAuliffe's message to heart, and today I'm going to tell you our story. But before I get into that, I want to say that you might not think of our story so much as thinking outside the box. You might think about it, as one of our staff described it to me, as thinking outside the fence. But even before I get into the story, I want to tell you a little bit about my own background, because when Governor McAuliffe appointed me to be the director, he was thinking outside the fence a bit as well. You see, I had never worked for state government before. I had never worked in public safety before. The most people I had supervised before I took this job was 10. And the Department of Juvenile Justice has close to 2,000 employees, which explains a lot, probably, to the people who work at the department. More than that, I was the founder and legal director of the Just Children program of the Legal Aid Justice Center here in town. And I spent my entire professional career to that point trying to keep kids out of the very facilities that the department operated. I appeared in the press, in the legislature, critical of the workings of the department, and on more than one occasion threatened to sue the very agency that I was now being appointed to run. The very last thing I would have wanted in the world, or the very last thing I would have thought would have happened, would be for me to be the guy whose picture is in the lobby of the juvenile correctional centers that I work so hard to keep kids out of. And yet, after I got appointed, there I was, the guy whose picture is on the wall in the lobby when you go into the facilities. Instead of sticking it to the man, which I had long prided myself on my ability to do, I had suddenly become him. Now, it's important to understand that the department is more than just locked facilities. In fact, that's a very small fraction of what we do. We have probation offices across Virginia. We run treatment programs, or I should say fund treatment programs across the state. On any given day, we have approximately 4,000 kids under some kind of supervision, more than 90% of whom are in the community. But when I started as director, and I got appointed in April of 2014, we were not doing very well. We were spending about 40% of our budget on the less than 10% of kids who were in those big, oversized, adult-like facilities. Most of the kids in there are kids who've been exposed to trauma, have mental health issues, have learning challenges. We're spending almost 40% of our money on that small percentage of kids, almost 80% of whom were getting rearrested within 3 years of our release. Thinking about the numbers a different way, if about 20% of the kids in Virginia are African American, more than 70% of the kids in our facilities are children of color. But the numbers only tell you part of the story, and it's important not just to get distracted by data. On my second day on the job, I had to watch a videotape of staff and some young people at Beaumont Juvenile Correctional Center pulling the lifeless body of a young man out of his cell where he had hung himself. The incident had happened a few weeks before I started, but it was part of my job to figure out what to do. And as I watched the videotape, I was overwhelmed by a range of emotions, not least of which was the thought that, what do I do now? But also the realization that these places that were in many ways supposed to be rehabilitative and places of opportunity and new starts had too often become places of despair. I want to assure you that the staff at the department then and the staff at the department now are hardworking people who care about kids. But they have incredibly hard jobs, and when you put people behind a fence in a facility that's really built more for adults, and the kids have multiple challenges, and the staff don't have resources or direction, it's hard to do good work. So we set about to make a change. And we brought in lots of people to help us figure this out. And our plan to transform the agency consisted of 3 primary activities. Number 1 was reducing the population of kids in those facilities, primarily by shortening the length of time they were there. We did some research that showed that the longer the kids were in the facilities, the more likely it was they were going to get in trouble when they went home. So that didn't make a lot of sense. We created alternative placements so not everybody had to get sent upstate. We started changing probation practices so we could get the right kid, the right program at the right time, so hopefully they didn't have to enter the system or penetrate that deeply. But we also realized we had to do better work in those facilities, and so we had a plan to dramatically transform the way we worked with kids and provide more opportunities for education and rehabilitation and growth and success. But we also realized that wasn't enough either, that ultimately to do the work we needed to do, we needed to replace these old institutions with something that would work better, with programs in communities so that kids could get what they needed where they lived and with their family. And for those small group of kids who had to be confined, building new, smaller, treatment-oriented facilities that weren't obstacles to rehabilitation, but were tools for rehabilitation. To do this last part, to replace the system, also involved getting authorization to close old facilities, to keep our money, to spend on these treatment programs. And it required not only getting the buy-in of Governor McAuliffe, who was all in from the beginning, it also required getting the buy-in from our Republican-controlled General Assembly. As if the work wasn't hard enough, we now had to get Democrats and Republicans to work together. Imagine that. Now, a plan is just words on a piece of paper or words on a whiteboard unless people fuel it and people support it and people give it momentum. And that's exactly what happened with us. People saw that we were now playing to win and try to do good things for kids instead of just keeping bad things from happening. And our staff, who in many ways had to suffer the most through all the changes, have embraced this. Our stakeholders, judges and community members and service providers, families, young people have embraced this. Our governor has embraced this. Our bipartisan group of legislators, Republicans and Democrats, have embraced this. And fueled with all this support, we've been able to accomplish actually quite a bit. When Governor McAuliffe took office in April of 2014, we had about 600 kids in our large facilities. Today, I'm happy to tell you that we only have 217. In terms of what's happening with the kids in the facilities, we've done a lot of work there too. We're creating many more educational opportunities for those young people who have to be confined. For example, when I started in 2014, we had no college classes, even though we could hold kids till they were 21. We recently had 2 young men leave us having earned 24 college credits during the time that they were with us. Historically, the agency and folks who work in the field have looked at parents in many ways as obstacles to rehabilitation, that they're part of the problem, not part of the solution. But we realized that if we really wanted to do good work, if we wanted to keep kids with their families or allow kids to return home to their families, we had to include families. Now, Virginia is a very big state, and Beaumont and Bonaire were both clustered around Richmond, making it very hard for families to visit their kids. So we came up with the idea and said, well, why don't we provide free transportation? So any weekend now, there are shuttle buses leaving from some point in the state, taking families to visit their kids. People were skeptical about that too. Well, parents don't care, they're not going to do this. In our very first year of doing this, we had 1,200 people take advantage of this service. We had parents who hadn't seen their kids for 2 years finally get a chance to visit. Now that all sounds good, and it's incredibly important. But really the main work we're doing in the facilities is trying to transform the work of our staff with the kids. We had juvenile correctional officers whose job was primarily to maintain order and maintain security. And they were told explicitly not to engage with kids. But they're there all the time. They're the adults who have the most contact with the kids in the facility. So we had to change that. We reclassified their position. We included new responsibilities. We shortened their work days from 12 hours to 8 so they'd be on the top of their game as much as they could. But in state government, it's not so easy to do that. You can't just flip a switch and say, you were a correctional officer one day, and these were your job responsibilities, and now you're what we're calling a resident specialist. We literally had to lay everybody off, redefine their jobs, and have them reapply for these new positions. We had folks who'd been in the agency for 20 or 30 years who had to go through this process. And it was scary, but I'm pleased to tell you that we've done it, and everyone is converted to this new way of doing work. It's been hard, because as if that wasn't enough, we also got approval to start closing facilities and keeping money. So people were learning new things at the same time as they were worried about their job. And we closed Beaumont Juvenile Correctional Center in June of this year. And with the money from that closure, we've been able to create new treatment programs across Virginia. To give you an illustration of what that's like, at the beginning of this year, only 2 jurisdictions in Virginia had access to this highly regarded evidence-based program that was really effective at working with high-risk kids in their communities, with their families, kids who might otherwise get locked up. By year's end, with the savings from the closure, we will have that service available in 100 jurisdictions across the state. The work is ongoing, and these structural changes, while they're huge, only tell part of the story. This thinking outside the fence, this trying to do good work instead of just keeping bad things from happening, this way of looking at it has cascaded throughout the agency. We have staff now thinking on their own about new ways of doing the work. We had a group of probation officers in Norfolk who, instead of just, as they traditionally had done, saying, I'm here to monitor compliance with the court's rules and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do, said, let's do something different. And they took a group of young men from Norfolk up to Washington to go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. They did it to expand those kids' view of the world, of themselves, of their society. In so doing, some of the kids who went on the trip got to go outside of Norfolk for the first time. One of the kids who went on the trip got to ride an escalator for the first time. We had a family day at Bonaire Juvenile Correctional Center, which is our last remaining place. We invited hundreds of family members to have kind of a fun, normal parent-kid experience. We had picnic, we had ice cream and cotton candy, and kids played games and got to sit at picnic tables with their parents and their siblings. And it was a beautiful day, but to make that work, we had to call volunteers in because there were so many people. And it was a Sunday, so not always easy to get volunteers on a Sunday. We had hundreds of volunteers. We had 2 staff who drove up from Abingdon, Virginia. They didn't have any kids in the facilities, but they drove up from Abingdon, Virginia to volunteer and be part of this amazing day. That's a 5-hour drive, and they weren't getting paid. People are embracing the work. In the facilities, people are doing all kinds of different things. They're taking kids outside the fence to go visit colleges, so they start to think about that as part of their future. In one instance recently, the staff had a young man who wanted to be an artist, so they took him outside the fence to go visit the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, where he could get inspired and think differently about what his future might look like. But the cascade, the investment, it's also not stopping with our staff. It's cascading down to the kids as well. I told you about the student government. So how that came about was young people in the facilities, they wanted more say and more of a voice. And we wanted them to have more of an opportunity to learn about civic participation and to be engaged in the community in which they lived. And Governor McAuliffe got wind of this and invited the founders to come down to meet with the governor and members of his cabinet and staff to talk about governance. And so our kids did a PowerPoint presentation and talked about what they wanted to do. And the governor's chief lawyer, Carlos Hopkins, said, well, if you want your government to last, you need to create a constitution. Now, our kids in our facilities don't come with high rates of educational success. They all too often don't come with a lot of confidence about what they're able to do, and it would have been so easy for them to say, I'm not going to do that. That's too much work. But instead, they embraced the challenge. And not only did they write what, again, I am sure is the first ever constitution crafted inside a juvenile correctional center in this country, but they've embraced the role of leaders, and they are actively working with the leadership at Buyin and indeed with the agency to help us understand our work better, to help us think about working with the young people and their families better. They are becoming partners in the process instead of just objects of our work. It's not to say that everything's perfect. It's not to say we don't still have work to do. Lots of people have gotten on board, but not everybody. Some people criticize us for going too far. Some people criticize us for not going far enough. And although we've dramatically reduced the number of kids in our facilities, there's still too many children of color. But we have done a lot. But if Governor McAuliffe had told me when he appointed me, said, Andy, this is what I want the agency to do. I want you to lay off everybody in the facilities and rehire them. I want you to create new college classes even though you don't have any new money. I want you to create the first ever constitutionally based student government and create free transportation for families from across the state. I want you to close facilities and persuade the Republicans in the General Assembly that you should be able to keep your money. I want you to do all that within the time of my governorship, which hopefully everybody knows is only 4 years, and there's an election next week. If he had said that to me, I would have said, Governor, you're crazy. We can't do that. But because we had so many people working, supporting, partnering, joining, we've been able to do as much as we did. But it's important to remember as I tell this story, I might be up here by myself, but I'm truly not alone. I'm here with the amazing people at the Department of Juvenile Justice who've literally shed blood, sweat, and tears to do what we've done so far. I'm here with the governor, and I'm here with members of the legislature, and I'm here with people in communities across the state who are supporting what we're doing, people in various roles in the system and people outside the system. Most importantly, I'm up here with my family, with my wife, Kelly, and our kids, Sage, Maya, Eden, and Rye, who've also been part of this, whether they wanted to be or not. This social change work is hard. It's left me tired. It's left me stressed. It's left me less than the father I would always want to be or the husband I should be. And my wife, in particular, had to pick up all that slack. And there was a lot. And I say this not to just say thank you to you, but also to let the rest of you know that this work is hard. It's hard not just on the people doing it, it's hard on the people they love, which is all the more reason we need to be involved when we see good things happening. As we're discovering in our country right now, progress is fragile. But as we're hopefully also coming to understand that we can't let the problems of the day, whether it's mass incarceration or anything else, be other people's problems. They belong to us too. And the solutions to those problems must as well. And when we do come together, when we approach each other and our work with courage and open hearts, we can become like alchemists. But instead of turning straw into gold, we can turn inmates into college students. We can turn prisons into treatment programs across the state. We can maybe even turn a traumatized community into a resilient and loving one. It always seems impossible until it's done. Thank you.